If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I'm talking to Stephen Jones. Stephen served with 3 RHA around about the same time I did, but he was in a different battery. Yeah, it's not my fault, that's his fault. He was actually in J Battery, and I served for many years with J Battery, but moved over to D Battery. J Battery was a good bunch of lads, I must admit. I really enjoyed being with them. Hi Stephen, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
I mean, this is our second go-around because the first time we tried this, let's say technical difficulties ensued and it just didn't work, did it? So we're having another go at it and we'll see how we get on. So like before, when I did it, we explained that there was only going to be 5 questions and then we'll see where we go from there. So if you just want to give us the first couple, where you grew up and what made you join the army.
Okay, so firstly off, great to meet you again. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
And thanks for having me on. So I was born in Birkenhead on the Wirral in Merseyside, and I joined pretty much because there wasn't really many opportunities in Birkenhead, to be fair. It's a working class sort of, an old dockers town. Yeah, so there wasn't really much industry there left. And the army just seemed to be a natural way to go to go and get away from the town and experience something new and improve myself, really. And I'd always wanted to do it from a young age. Probably from the age of 8 or 9, I'd always wanted to be a soldier in the army. So, yeah, it was pretty fitting that that's the way it went.
I mean, were you in the cadets or anything like that?
No, I wasn't, no. And it's funny because I've got no family members who were serving. Only my granddad that did his national service, but no career forces personnel within my whole family background. So I've broken the mould there and been the first out of the 2 generations to do it.
So how old were you when you joined then?
So I was 18. It must have been 2 weeks after my 18th birthday was when I turned up at Purbright for basic.
So what made you choose the artillery then? Or was it chosen for you?
It was kind of chosen for me. So I'd ventured into the recruiting office in Birkenhead, and it was actually Dougie McClure who was on the recruiting desk. So naturally he's swaying me towards the artillery, being 3 RHA himself. So yeah, he sat me down and showed me what capabilities the artillery's got, how versatile the artillery is in general. And then he got talking about his regiment, 3 RHA, and what they did, and about the forward observers, and it was the forward observer bit that caught me. That's what sort of gripped me. I thought, yeah, that's a pretty cool job. I want a piece of that. So, before I knew it, 2 or 3 weeks later, I was on a train leaving Liverpool Lime Street and heading to Purbright.
I mean, 2 or 3 weeks, that's madness. I mean, even in my time when I joined in 85, it took me a couple of months to get in.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was pretty
I was at school still, so it wasn't, I couldn't help that,
Yeah.
Probably, but I mean, can you imagine that now? No.
No chance. No chance.
Nah.
I think it takes long. I think it takes that long for them to get an answer, doesn't it, on this online recruiting lark? I don't know.
I think it takes that long to fill the form in.
Yeah.
So what was Purbright like for you? I mean, because you've got no experience of the military, you wouldn't really know what you were expecting.
Yeah, it was an eye-opener, to be fair. Big eye-opener. I remember the first 20 minutes of being there, I was asked what my name was. I told him it was Stephen. And they were like, you don't have a first name, it's Jones from now on. Before you knew it, I was on a parade square getting absolutely hammered for an hour. So that, yeah, it was an eye-opener, but I enjoyed the challenge. I knew it was going to be challenging. I knew it was going to be pretty difficult, but I wanted to get away and do something new. And I knew that the army was the outlet that would let me do it. And I was always quite adventurous and outgoing as a young person anyway. I enjoyed being outdoors. I enjoyed camping. I enjoyed being out with mates, my air rifle back in the day. It was a natural fit for me to be outdoors.
So how did you find the training that physically, not just mentally?
I think physically, because I'm quite a thin guy and I've always been quite slim, especially back then I was mega thin. And I did find it quite difficult. But it's funny because we were in the first mixed gender troop in Pirbright history on my intake, and it was an experimental intake where they would have females and males in the same troop doing basic training together with the same physical test, and it was an experiment that they wanted to trial, and it just happened that it was my intake that they were going to trial it on. So we kind of had pretty much a hybrid of fitness level tests that was only being trialed in our troop. So when it came to the tests, it wasn't too bad for the men at the time. Some of us actually got a little bit frustrated with it, but it's one of them things. You just cracked on. That was what was happening at the time, and I think actually that model was then continued since then all the way through as a mixed troop, I believe.
I mean, looking back to that, this might sound a bit of a shit question.
Yeah.
But did you think or did you see any, or did you, well, I'd say see, experience, or just even imagine that there was any favouritism paid towards the girls?
No, I don't think there was, to be honest. I think if anything,
or was it the other way around?
Yeah, if anything,
with a harder.
Yeah, if anything, it was the other way around, because we also had a mixed female and male directing staff. It was also part of this social experiment within Pirbright, and I think because of that, the female DS were a lot harder on the female recruits than actually they were to us, to be fair. But it was different for our troop. It was a little bit different, and I wasn't expecting it because we weren't told before we arrived at Pirbright that this was going to happen. But we cracked on, and there was a few good female recruits there, just as there was male recruits, and they passed out with us at the end of it, and probably had good careers. I think I bumped into one or two of them along the line. Yeah, so it's obviously worked for everyone.
So you've enjoyed your time at Pirbright, and then it's off to phase 2 training, isn't it?
Yeah, it's off to phase 2 training then, and I went on to light gun training first because I actually decided to give 2-9 Commando a go. Yeah, so I decided I'd give 2-9 Commando a go. So I got put onto level 2 light gun course. I think I also did a level 2 comms course, and obviously did my driving up to HGV. And it was at that point, I think, on the phase 2 guns course where we're actually out on the exercise area doing our final tests, and the DS arrived with a transmitter radio, and they were broadcasting what was happening at the Twin Towers in the States. So that was sort of happening while we were on our phase 2 training. We then all got called back in from the area and addressed by I think it might have been the Garrison Sergeant Major and a couple of others, and pretty much said, your intake right now, you will, within the foreseeable future, you'll go to war. It's going to happen. And funny enough, before we knew it, we were into our regiment and we were doing that. But while I was waiting, for that to happen, I went off to 2-9 and had a bash at the commando course down in Plymouth, and which again was a really good experience for a young bloke. Very difficult, very difficult. I didn't pass it. 3 attempts had it. They were fortunate enough to give me 3 attempts. Back then it was 2 attempts and you were out, unless you had something about you and they thought they might be able to drag you over the line. And so I was given a 3rd attempt, but it was the load carrying that I struggled with. Because of my physique, I was a lot thinner than I am now, and I've always been quite thin. I struggled with bearing the amount of weight and over those long distances, and I just couldn't crack that, unfortunately. So I was at 2-9 for about a year. So that took me to about the beginning of 2002. And then I decided, go to 3 RHA, where Dougie McClure had been part of, and go down the Germany route. Now, I wanted to travel. I wanted to join the army, get away from Liverpool. So I thought, let's give Germany a try and see what that's like.
Well, it's very different from like being at 2-9, even if you were only doing the course or whatever. We all know that like 2-9 of the Marines and all that kind of treat you a bit more grown up than other regiments, let's say. So it must have been a bit of a shock for you turning up to Germany, and all of a sudden, like, you've already done a year, and you've had some bastings, and then you turn up again. You turn up at 3 RHA, and you're the NIG, you're the Sprog.
Yeah.
How did you find that, like a change of environment and everything?
I think the environment I found strange going from the Citadel in Plymouth, which is a very small camp, to then being lumped into Bergen-Honer camp, multinational, massive, a whole brigade were in the one camp. So I found that a bit strange. But in terms of settling into the regiment, because I've been at 2-9 and I'd done 3 attempts at the commando course, my admin was pretty on the ball and I was super duper fit. But for a regular troop, I was really, really fit. And so it didn't take me long to fit in to the regiment, to be fair. And I think it was only after a week, it was at the M troop, it was Jock Old that pulled me to one side, and he was the TSM at the time of the observer troop in J Battery. And he said, you're coming across to the OPs, you're wasted on the gun. So straight away he headhunted me, and I did 0 time on the guns, which was great for me because I didn't particularly like the guns, and my goal was always to be a forward observer, and to be able to come to 3 RHA and within a week be on the observer troop. It was unheard of before. It never happened, and so that for me was pretty sweet. Obviously, I still had to prove myself within the troop and stuff, but I was in the troop, so I was made up.
I mean, there was some good guys in that troop as well, to be honest.
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
I hadn't been away from the battery that long when you got there. I mean, I turned back up at the same time you did, but then got sent to D battery, and I wasn't happy about that.
Yeah,
at the time, I really wasn't happy about that.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it probably turned out the best thing that happened to me in 3rd, because I got into less trouble, put it that way. Let's say, I mean, I won't say I didn't, I still got into trouble, but I got into less trouble.
Yeah. Well, I was the same as you. I did a stint at D Battery as well later on in my career. We'll come to that later.
I mean, it's weird, isn't it? You got C battery, J battery, D battery, and HQ battery, and they are very different batteries. I mean, JJ Series A, the gayest battery in the RHA. The Brill Cream Boys, and I used to get called that when I was in it and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Brill Cream Boys.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to suffer from that.
Yeah.
But the batteries are very different. But I think in reality, it was quite a good regiment. I came from 4-7 when I first joined. My first regiment was 4-7. And we were dreading it coming to 3rd because we just thought it was going to be like, bull boots every day, loads of bullshit, stuff like that. And it really wasn't. It really, really wasn't. It was quite a grown-up regiment, although some people might say different things, and everyone's got different experiences of their time in the army and their time in the regiment and stuff. And, it's a personal thing. So, I mean, what was the first thing that you got involved with then when you were there?
Well, obviously, 9/11 had happened. People had already been, sent to Afghanistan, as in the Marines and a few other units. So there's a bit of a buzz in the air. And we all knew that something was going to happen. We just didn't know when. So it was a case of just, biding our time. I managed to get myself on an OPAT level 2 course pretty early on in order to get qualified. So at least I knew the basics in case, the balloon went up and we were sent somewhere. But you could just tell there was a bit of a buzz. There was a lot of exercises going on with the battle groups at the time, doing a lot of joint activity. The vehicles were going through a sort of fix up and a really good refit, basically. Not refit as in new, but they were just getting refurbished by the troops and getting themselves ready because we just knew something was going to happen. So that whole year was pretty much taken up with getting used to the troop, getting used to the people, getting used to the environment, doing my courses, and then, more rumblings. And then towards the back end of 2002, we were being sort of warned off at that stage. And I think it accumulated with a large battle group size exercise on Hona Range. I think it was before the Christmas. I think it was December 2002. Yeah. I think we did that.
Was that Sheldrake Sword, I think it's called?
Yeah, it was, yeah. So it would have been early December 2002. And I just remember laughing to myself because it was like minus 26 degrees, and we're training to go to war in the desert, so I always remember that was quite funny.
I remember it being rather cold, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, and that was pretty much my first exercise, and it was a full-on battle group, full size, full armour, everyone out, every man and his dog, and it was pretty much this is an exercise to prove yourselves, are you guys going to be ready to deploy, sort of thing. So that for me, for that to be my first exercise, I think I was quite spoiled in that sense from a military knowledge point of view. My first exercise being pretty much one that we were going to deploy straight off the back of.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, then I'll always remember that exercise. I mean, I was on the FPC then. That was cold. I mean, like the first day we went out, during the day it was -15. I remember one of the lads he had an old Nokia phone and it had a thermometer on it, and he was just stood in the middle of like where all the OPs and that were going. It's -15, and a couple of the Fijian lads had actually packed the wrong sleeping bags.
Oh boy!
So we had to sneak, and they never said anything until the next day. So all we could do was like in the cab of the Warrior just shaking.
Yeah.
So we snuck them back into camp, as you did.
Yeah.
So, pretending we were going to pick some up from the. I think it was we got to pick someone up from the Imbitron or something like that. And snuck them back into camp so they could get the proper sleeping bags. Otherwise, they'd have been gubbered. And I mean, they went that night. I think they went. Yeah, well, you can suffer for it for a night, and you'll never do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, God, that was cold. At one point, we had 2 Kero eaters in the FPC.
Yeah.
One at the back door and one at where the commander used to stand.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was toasty in there. It was toasty.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was also on the FPC for my first stint in the OP troop. I was one of the signallers, obviously learning the trade still. And so I started off in the FPC. I was on the FPC for that exercise, and then subsequently for the Iraq invasion.
I think that's, when you think back, I think that's a good idea. So new lads into the OP troops should have done a stint on the FPC because you get to see a bigger picture. I mean, I'd come from the gun end, and you're interested in what's happening at the gun end. You don't think about what's happening battle group wise or anything like that. All you're interested in is getting that data, the guns, and firing.
Yeah.
You don't really understand or appreciate everything else that's going on. And then when I say a bigger picture, I'm just thinking of battle group level. And then there's a bigger picture than that, and then there's a bigger picture than that as well. But when I first started on the FPC, like exercises in Canada and just seeing how everything meshed together, and how it linked in together, and how important the artillery was.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't give it the due that it deserves. Sometimes it's a battle winner type of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but it was interesting.
Yeah, it definitely shaped my career for sure, especially for my later years of my career. It definitely shaped me ready for that. When it comes to bigger picture, I ended up at strategical level, at the operational level, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it definitely helped me with that, and that was kind of my foundation to the artillery was battle group level business. And so I was quite pleased with that, to be fair, and it did help me out a lot.
So, I mean, you've just turned up in the regiment, you've done your first big exercise, and all of a sudden you're at war. That's like flash to bang in it,
Pretty much.
How did you feel about that, and how did you find it, and what's your memory of it?
Yeah, I think for the first one, I always remember that just before I joined the army, I'd been to the cinema with my mum, and I think it was 2 or 3 months before I actually joined. And I went to go and watch a film with Samuel L. Jackson called Rules of Engagement. I don't know whether you've ever seen it. He's in the Middle East anyway, and something goes wrong, and he ends up a shooting, and then there's an inquiry about did you shoot into civilians and stuff like that. Well, and I always remember my mum turning around to me, because I'd already applied to join, or I'd already looked at the brochures and said, I want to join up. And she said, when you join up, you don't go anywhere that's going to be like this film. And then, funny enough, sort of 18 months down the road, that's exactly where I'm heading to, an area with that sort of theme, But I always remember that, and I remind her about it as well. So before I know it, I'm 19 years old, 19 years of age, and I'm in Telit 1. I'm in Iraq. I don't think I'll ever, I don't think many of the future soldiers from now will see anything on that scale again. I really don't, not for a long time. When you're talking armour against armour and the amount of army we deployed with, I think it'll take a long time for us to get back to that stage. And so in that respect, I was quite lucky. And I think my main sort of memories of it was it was like bonfire night. The sky was just consistently illuminated with charged super 155, just constantly in the sky, and there's missiles flying around from helicopters, there's fast jets roaring ahead, it was pretty unbelievable stuff. But I was young and naive, so I didn't quite fully understand exactly what was happening all the time, because I was only 19 and I was relatively new to the troop. I was still finding my way and still learning the ropes on the job, if you know what I mean. But I think I did a good job overall. Reports back from the lads, after sort of post-op was, he did well there, Jonesy. He figured it all out and stuff. And again, it was just experience for me for later on in my career, because that wasn't it wasn't the only time I was going to deploy to hostile zones.
No, I mean it was an interesting time. I mean there was a fair bit of hurry up and wait, and then all of a sudden it kicked off. I mean for us we used to be in the same, because I think you were in the same area. It was watching the UN drive away from the border, and you just went, shit, right, something's happening, and it was literally the day after. We went over it through Safwan. Well, I remember we were in that regimental lie-up, and we'd all been told because everyone had wrote names on the vehicles and stuff like that,
Yeah, that's right.
And we were all told, get it off. Why? It took ages to write that on there. And we were just like, well, what's happening? Because nobody, we didn't know, things don't, the information doesn't get passed down.
Yeah.
We just looked up and we just seen a convoy of, white vehicles driving away, and just thought, fucking hell.
Yeah.
And then it was like, and all your personal stuff in. Oh, shit.
That was
Here
it.
we go. And I'm like you, I mean, I've spoken to lots of lads afterwards and said, how did you feel about it and that? And again, you probably didn't understand the gravitas of the situation, or it was the training we'd had that we weren't that nervous, we weren't that scared, we were trained well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a mix of the two.
You just went on and got on with it. Yeah. Yeah, I know some of the younger lads, there was trepidation from them. But I think I was lucky, I was a bit older, and I was in the first Gulf and stuff like that, and I've done a fair few tours, and around that time, there wasn't that many tours going on. It wasn't until after Optelic 1 that the freaking old world seemed to erupt
exactly.
everywhere. But I was kind of okay about it in reality. The only time, and I've said it on this podcast before, the only time I was ever, I wouldn't say in fear of my life, but scared, or worried, was the day we'd moved forward, going towards, because then I was doing recce at the time, and we moved forward to go to the airport. We were setting up a survey point, and the regiment for some reason fucking bypassed us. We were just sat there, and it comes over the gun net, and they said, right, just stay there until it gets light, and then meet us at the airport. Don't drive through the night because there's fucking baddies in the area.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's three of us on this fucking 432 just sat like that. Well, what do we do now? It's like, well, we'll put the BV on for a start. Had some scrum. And then it was the next morning. We've seen two Yank helicopters, Cobras, come flying overhead. And we looked up at them, and they turned round and started flying back to us. I'll tell you what, it's the quickest we've ever got a Union Jack out the back of that wagon.
Oh, I bet.
Literally fucking waving it at them. Even though we got all the IR stuff and everything like that.
Yeah.
Went no chance. But that was the only time I was worried about anything.
Yeah.
I thought, fuck, that'd be a shit way to go.
Yeah.
Reminiscence of Gulf War One,
yeah.
if you want to call that. And everything. I just thought, fuck that.
And I mean, it was, I don't think it was until the back end of the tour, really, where I'd been involved in something pretty significant. And it was after the war phase had been declared finished. And we were in that transition period of peace period. And we'd taken over 29's AOR up in, where was it now? Up near the pipelines, right on the Iranian border it was. We'd pushed into that area and took over their space because they bugged out and went back home. And we'd been called out, the QRF had been called out from one of the local elders in the area, come running over and said that there'd been a shooting in one of the houses of his neighbour's house, and they've been killed, and these guys have now taken over the house. So we turned up, small 5-man team in the QRF. The minute we turned up, we were in a firefight straight off the bat. As soon as we turned into the street, small arms from this particular house. So we ended up in a 3-hour contact then, followed by a OBUA clearance of the house. Between, I think we'd called QRF2 out. So I think there was actually 10 of us on the ground in total. I think 5 people had gone round and done a cordon, and then us other 5 had gone into the little alleyways, pushed through. There was me, Big Smudge from D Battery was involved, Jamie McMillan, Kev Penny, and a few others. And yeah, we did a full-on OBUA house clearance there and then. And for 19 years old, I'd done no sort of OBUA training before, not even in pre-deployment training. Yes, that was pretty significant. And it wasn't until we got back to Hona that we were all awarded a brigade commander's commendation for that. So that was pretty buzzing, to come back from Telic 1 with an award like that. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And it's not until you look back on it now when I think, God, 19 years old and I was doing stuff like that. It's crazy when you think about it.
But again, it's the training as well. I mean, at the time, you haven't got time to feel fear or worry about it. It's that adrenaline rush and
Yeah, that's it.
everything like that. But it's afterwards, the cool down afterwards.
Mm.
You think, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Like really?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know that situation. I don't even think it was training because, as I say, I've never trained for that before. I think it was just the fact that I was with other professionals who did know what they were doing, and I kind of just followed suit with them, even though I was the first one through the door. I was expendable. I was 19, so they
fucking go on, get
they
in.
were like, "Joe, you're the first one in, mate. Crack on."
Yeah, you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, so it's like, all right, cheers, lads.
I mean, when you look back at it as well, I mean, as artillery, your secondary role is infantry and stuff like that, but you don't do anything of it.
No.
But I mean, just from the names that you mentioned there, they've done multiple Northern Ireland tours between them.
Yeah, that's right.
The training on that and stuff like that, you don't forget.
Yeah.
I think that would have come to the fore there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So we've got back from Celtic, we're back in Hona. For me, round about that time, it was kind of like just getting back into the routine of, CPXs, training, this, Canada, fucking back, another one, blah, blah, blah. And then, we started getting into rotation of, Optelics and then Operic and all that.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough, and I do say I was fortunate enough, never to go to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I left the regiment in 2006, halfway through Optelic. And then went over to 3-9, and then I lost sight of the regiment and fucking lost interest in it personally.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I mean, so what happened to you afterwards then? Now it's like, I've said enough. I've had enough of my stint in third.
Yeah.
It's all over to you.
So then, obviously, we had a further few tours of Iraq. We moved on to Telic 7, and I went Telic 7 and we re-rolled to Rifleman, because at the time there was no requirement for 155 in the city, so we re-rolled to Rifleman and the battery deployed out, and we were pretty much doing protection of the Basra Palace, pushing out patrols. So we had daily patrols. I think it was 3, maybe 4 patrols a day, and obviously doing the logistic protection routes, because at this point the IED era was well and truly full on, and there was all weird and wonderful IEDs that the insurgents were coming up with. They were very effective and very dangerous. So in a sense, for me, Telic 7 was more dangerous than Telic 1, in my opinion. It was just a lot more of a dangerous city, and the eyes were on us, the targets were on us from both sides, whether it was the Shias or the Sunnis. Yeah, so that was a pretty tough time, I thought, Telic 7, just purely because of the IEDs. Really scary, especially at night time. I even still get chills thinking about it now, and you're cutting around with your LLMs looking through tons of rubbish at the side of the roads, and for a fact that there's IEDs hidden in them, and you're looking for a piece of command wire or a tiny antenna or something to try and give away something there. Realistic reality with an LLM, it was really difficult to do, to be honest. And I think it was, only for our countermeasures that we were, we didn't lose as many as we did during that tour. Yeah, so that was a very different tour to the first one, but still, you still have to be just as professional as you did on the first one. And again, because I'd done Telic 1, my knowledge base was a lot better at this point. My confidence was a lot higher. I was no longer a new guy. I'm a Lance Jack now at this time in the Observer Troop, and we sort of did the job. Telic 7 was Telic 7. It was a rifleman's tour, and that was that, really. It was a bit of a strange tour, I thought, in that respect. We were sort of there, we did our business, and then we left, if you will. Very strange.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people argue, and I say argue. I watched a full-blown fight with somebody, 2 guys who were arguing about Optelic 1 and Optelic 2.
Yeah.
And they were saying, Optelic 2 was more dangerous than Optelic 1. Optelic 1 was more dangerous than Optelic 2. They were very different things.
Yes.
As Optelic got further along, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it started dying down once the threat had kind of, I wouldn't say subdued itself, but it was a different thing. We went to war. Optelic 1 was a war.
The
and
threat
very different.
changed, I think, was the key. The threat completely changed, and the focus towards us and the Americans and the coalition in general changed. And I think that's what made them two different, completely different war zones. They became two different war zones, basically, even though it was the same country. Very odd.
But I mean, it was the mismanagement by us. Not well. I'm not going to say the Brits had much choice in the matter either, but I think it was the mismanagement of the country afterwards.
Yeah.
Let's say getting rid of the Ba'ath Party completely, and then saying nobody who was in the Ba'ath Party was allowed to be in charge of anything.
Yeah.
So you're right. I talked to a guy the other week who he was over there. Built some water towers and stuff like that while they were there, and they couldn't get anyone to maintain them because all the engineers were in the Ba'ath Party, so they'd sacked all of them and said no one.
Yeah.
So you got people getting jobs in local government, in higher government, and in charge of money, in charge of municipal service and stuff like that. We hadn't got a clue.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like, all right, we caused that by saying, no one's allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, that should have been thought about a bit better. I mean, for example, and this is totally off-piste and off-subject, I watched a documentary the other week about the British forces in Vietnam, and I was like, the what? We weren't there. Well, this was after the war. So Vietnam had kicked off straight away then, and the Brits went in and nearly solved it all. But the way we couldn't handle, we didn't have enough troops in the area. So what they did is they re-rolled all the Japanese prisoners of war they had. They went, right, you know what? You're no longer in the Imperial Army. You're working for us. Here's your rifle back. Get out there and be professional. And they were.
Yeah.
They just wanted to do a job. And they basically, within a matter of months, they nearly beat, the Viet Cong.
Yeah.
Literally nearly took them all out. And then the French turned up and went, no, it's our bag now. You all go on. Right, fuck that.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah.
Shit, that's gone wrong. And that's a very simplistic way of saying it.
Yeah.
But the way I say that is to say that we should have used the local resources a lot more than we did.
Yeah, definitely.
And, but again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We can all look back and say, oh, well, they should have done this, should have done that. The rules were made at a higher level than we were ever going to be at.
That's it.
And you just follow them. I mean, it is a bit weird, it is sad that, a country that probably did need help and we went in, let's face it, illegally, even though, I'm still proud of us doing it. Did our job. Is still suffering now. It's better than it was, but it's going to take many, many, many years.
Yeah.
For it to
whether the conflict was right or wrong from a political standpoint, it doesn't matter to me and you.
No,
we were there to do a job. We did the job as best as we could do it, and that's that. You can't afford to get entwined in the politics of it. You just can't. It's not worth it from our standpoint.
So what was for you after that then? What was next in store for you?
So again, it was just ploughing through the usual exercises with J Battery. I think we did a few Poland, Canada, Kenya, and then before we knew it, well, I was back in Iraq again on Octelic 12. And again, completely different circumstances. Again, so at this stage, the British troops had pulled out of the city and we'd occupied the Cobb out in the desert. And our task at that point was counter IDF. And we were getting a lot of incoming because we were one big, massive target. So we'd get hit pretty much every day, multiple times a day with Chinese rockets, all sorts of incoming. So I worked in the brigade ops room, doing the counter IDF role, utilising the radars and the UAVs in order to then do the precision strikes in that counter IDF role. And I think that was sort of when we really started to join capability with the other artillery units. So when we really started incorporating the UAS with the radars, which were giving us the point of impact, the point of origins. And it was at that point it was decided that we were to change from forward observers to fire support teams because we were there was more technology involved that we could provide to the company or who we were with. So we were known then as fire support teams from then on. And I think that was definitely the sort of time period where we got better with the technology that we had and we'd start to utilise it effectively. And I found that all really interesting in that sense that now I'm seeing other capabilities that I'd never used or seen previously before on such a high, probably on such an accessible level is probably the right way to say it. So I found that tour really interesting.
I might say it changed from the food parties and all of a sudden FST. I mean, we've always kind of had FSTs in a way, but like you say, they didn't have the capabilities that they had now, or even the training.
That's right, yeah.
The training got more and more intense, and it's changed the role completely. You look at, I mean, obviously I've been out in the army for 12 years, so I only get to see like very limited picture of what's actually happening in the forces anymore. It's talking to people who've got out recently and stuff like that, and then still talking to people who are in. The roles are very different, and just how it's affected the artillery as well. I mean, look at 3rd. It's totally different regiment it was to when I left.
That's right.
Totally different.
Yeah.
It's got all the cap badges in it.
Yeah.
Fuck's all that about? You know what I mean? It's like, well, what's he doing? He's fucking tanky. He's in the RAF. What's he doing in 3rd? Type of thing. It's a completely different role. And I would imagine a lot more interesting. You've got a lot more experience. I mean, I've got none. How did you find that transition from, let's say, steam gunnery, steam OPs, if you want to the more modern capabilities, and how did that affect the way you worked?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because I'd joined and I saw the progression of the technology. It was just, we had it overnight, if you know what I mean. So it was being used throughout sort of my earlier years. But it was being used in small doses. So I was getting a snippet of it here and a snippet of it there. And then I was able to utilize something on this exercise and then utilize something else on this exercise. And then on the 3rd exercise, I combined the two, and you'd be able to utilize both. So it was a progression for me, I think, a learning progression of the technologies. So I didn't find it too difficult. I think if I'd have had a gap in service, maybe after TELIC 1, and then joined in, TELIC 12 period, I'd have been like, whoa, what am I supposed, this is way too much. My head's going to explode. But I had that sort
like coming out of the Bronze Age, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I was quite fortunate that, during the exercise and during the times where I wasn't on tour, we were getting introduced to this equipment, what it can do, how to utilize it, how to use it, how to use the people that use it. And, so in that sense, it wasn't too bad. And in terms of how did it change things, well, it was an absolute game changer. An absolute game changer for an observer to be able to observe stuff, without the Mark 1 eyeball. You can do it via a drone, onto your tablet. You can do it via a radar where it's picking up things in the microspectrum that, we can't visually see. So in terms of that, it was an absolute game changer, big time. But you have to know how to use it and how to use it effectively. There's no point having it and not being trained properly with it, because then it just becomes difficult, and you might as well revert back to not having anything. So you've got to be correctly trained and know exactly the best way to use it, let's say. And that was what the exercises were doing for us in between those tour years.
I mean, going out to Afghanistan, I spoke to guys who were in FSTs out there, and you were more or less on your own type of thing within units.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it was quite upfront and personal. You don't get a chance to get a drone in the air, this, that, and the other, and it would revert back to like, okay, now they're over there. Look, they're over there. I can see them. Grid, and off it goes, and boom. So as much as you get all that training, and like you say, in a bigger picture, and especially like in a, let's say, maneuver war, or even a like kind of static, like what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, stuff like that. Yeah, you've got I wouldn't say the luxury of using all that equipment or all them different, the different like forces that you can bring in, and the different aspects of it. I wouldn't say luxury, but it kind of is compared to like what you'd have experienced in Afghanistan, where it was just almost like back to basics.
Yeah, it was totally different. My first Herrick tour then was Herrick 13, and I actually deployed as a fire support individual. So for those that don't even know what one of them is, basically one entity of the FST team being deployed forward mounted with a platoon in a platoon house, and there's only one of you. That's it. You're the only one that can bring in the rain if required.
I can't get my head around that.
Yeah, so the way we kind of did it was we had our FST commander and his AC were in the HQ platoon, which was about a K and a half away from my platoon. So I was with a platoon, then we had the other two lads in the FST team and their signallers. They were in the other two platoons, but I was on my own, and I was deployed with the Royal Welsh, and it was a Rorke's Drift Company of all people.
Oh, fucking hell.
Well, what a great bunch, though! I tell you, they were. I mean, I've worked with a lot of battle groups, and they were the best battle group I've ever worked for, hands down. They pretty much, I think, after a couple of weeks of training pre-deployment, I felt like I was one of them. They really understood what we could bring to the party, so they treated me like one of their own. So our main mission. So each platoon house was separated. We had the HQ platoon, but then we were all given a common mission. And for us, we were in Kunjak, in Lashkargah region in the Green Zone, and our mission was to disrupt the Taliban's R&R. So they were coming from areas like Sangin and coming into Kunjak, into the quiet area of the Green Zone, thinking they could go chill out for 2 weeks, and have their R&R. Well, our job was just to go and disrupt it. So every time we went out, we were just poking the hornet's nest, because that's what we were told to do. And being
that's quite a good job, I like that.
Yeah, and fire support individual in a platoon, that made it really difficult. Because there was only one of me, I would have to platoon with patrol with every section. So I was doing 3 patrols a day rather than just one if I was a normal rifleman, because there was only one of me. And so, I did more boots on the ground that tour than any other person within the Royal Welsh.
But as well as that, it's quite a responsibility as well.
Yeah. I mean, I was only a full screw. Was that? Yeah, I was only a full screw at the time.
Yeah.
So from a full screw's perspective, to be on your own and trusted with, calling in fires, especially under enemy firelight, and there was a lot of that going on in that tour, trust me. It's pretty responsible job for a full screw. Yeah.
So what was it like? I mean, your first contact was obviously it was on Optelic, or towards the end of Optelic. Stuff that you'd have experienced on the other Optelics is very different to that. But Afghanistan, it was very, and I hate the word, but everyone throws it about. I don't like the word myself, kinetic. I think because the reason I'm not keen on that word is that a lot of people use it and they don't really understand what they're saying when they say it.
Yeah.
You get a lot of people on YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that saying, "Oh yeah, it was dead kinetic." It's like, slow down. But it was a very different theatre of war or theatre of operation.
Yeah.
And some people won't call it an Afghan a war, but it fucking definitely was.
Oh, trust me, it was.
Well, I've had it from the horse's mouth. I mean, the horse's mouth was like General Richards, and he said it was a war. So if he tells me it's a war, I don't care what anyone else says.
Yeah,
it was a fucking war.
Yeah, I would trust me, it was war. Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, he was in charge of it. So
that's right. Yeah. So I mean, from the if you want to try and analyse sort of the Iraq campaign and the Afghanistan campaign, I think in terms of when people say it was more kinetic, I think with the Taliban, they would take you on with small arms. They were tactically very, very sound from a tactical sense, and they were pretty good soldiers. Even though I respected them as an enemy. Don't get me, but not what their beliefs or rights were about, or what their gripes were about. Sorry, but as an enemy, you had to respect them, because otherwise you were going to get them. You were going to get it. So I think when people say kinetic, they mean more. They were more hands-on with you. They would directly engage in a contact with you. Whereas in Iraq, the insurgency, they were a lot more behind closed doors, very technologically advanced with their IED making. And they knew that worked. So they tended to just stay in the shadows and utilise that sort of capability, rather than, we'll engage you with 3 or 4 PKM fixed positions and we'll hit you at the same time with RPGs, as well as maybe an IED if we planted one. So there was very 2 different ways that the 2 different enemies I faced would engage me, basically. And so I think when people say kinetic, I wouldn't say it was more or less kinetic than Iraq in terms of things happening, but in terms of what was being thrown at you, I think it was more small arms in Afghanistan and direct contacts. They like to get up and close. because they knew that we would struggle to get artillery in because we were trying to minimise collateral damage. So they knew the closer we got to them before they opened fire, the harder it would be for us to get rounds down. And that happened time and time again, especially when I then became a JTAC and did a future Afghan tour, which we'll talk shortly after. Trying to get rounds down, at that distance was very difficult because you're way beyond danger close at that point. Sometimes they'd wait until you were 50 metres and then they would open up with PKM. You're like, because you couldn't see them, because, you're walking through cornfields, or they'd come out of tunnels in the ground. They were very, very clever at that sort of thing. They were like ghosts. And a lot of people, if you've read things about when the Russians were in Afghanistan, they reverted to them as ghosts, as the Taliban. And they were. 1 minute they're there, next minute they're gone. And the opposite. They're not there, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's 4 PKMs going off at you. You just don't know where they're coming from. Very, very clever, very tactically savvy enemy.
So how did you feel about your first contact over there? Was it had the excitement kicked in? It was all adrenaline? I mean, like you said, you were going out on so many patrols.
Yeah, so
you'd have seen a lot more action than most.
Yeah, so the first one happened. I think it took 4 days for the first Afghan contact. I think we did four days of patrolling, and they were just watching us. We knew they were out there. We could hear them on the ICOM radios, because we had interpreters that were telling us, what they were talking about. They've got eyes on you. And that was very strange. It's strange to know that they're talking about you, and they're telling them, wait, nothing today, it's just watch. And they watched us. They studied us for 4 days. And then we went out on this particular patrol, and we're just pushing through a load of corn. And we were I think the front 3 men of the platoon had just come out into open ground. And there was another cornfield maybe, 150 metres further on. Well, there was a line of PKMs just set up in there, and they waited until the first 3 of us had cleared through into that open ground, and then opened up with PKMs. Then they opened up with a few RPGs from the side, so it all went off. At that point, then all it's a case of doing. You get into your staggered formation. Everyone's got an arc, and you return in fire. And at that point, we were in a killing zone. We had to get out of the killing zone. So we did a fighting withdrawal from that particular contact. And to be fair, there was a lot of fighting withdrawals. And I won't be afraid to admit that. They were very clever at setting up ambushes, the Taliban. I think we'd have been very silly if we hadn't done any fighting or tactical withdrawals at certain points. Yeah, so we managed to get back to the PB. Everyone unscathed. God knows how. The amount of rounds that was flying over, close proximity to our head. No one got hit. So there was an adrenaline rush there, but there was also a realization of, okay, well, this is a different enemy than the one I faced in Iraq. These guys want to scrap, and that kind of set the tone on day 4 as to what was going to be ahead for the next 7 months, because it was a 7-month tour for me at that point. So yeah, very interesting, that first engagement. Mixed emotions, I think.
You mentioned earlier just now about becoming a JTAC later on, and for people who don't understand what the role of a JTAC is, could you just explain that? I'll say with a caveat of what you can actually talk about, because we know that there's things that you can't mention.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, essentially they basically call in any fires from airborne assets. So whether that's a fixed wing aircraft, whether it's a UAV, whether it's attack helicopter, basically anything that's got munitions on that you can utilise from airborne assets. The JTAC coordinates that, but he also coordinates the airspace that those platforms are moving in and out of. So you're in charge of the deconfliction of those assets to make sure that they're not going to fly into each other, as well as doing what you need them to do on the ground in support of ground troops. But there's a lot of pre-work that goes into requesting those assets. So there's 2 ways you can do it. So obviously one, which everyone probably heard of, is troops in contact. So a contact happened, I'm being engaged, we're in my platoon, I'm going to call an asset on the radio, I'm troops in contact, I need something ASAP. Yeah, whether I can request rotary ring or fixed wing, or I can just ask for an asset and something will turn up. The other side of it is where I put a Joint Tactical Air Request form in, and basically you do that 48 hours prior to a patrol. You give them your patrol route, you give them as much mapping detail as you can, You give them any vulnerable things in the area. So has there been any ground-to-air fires from the enemy in recent days? Just things to protect the aircraft. And basically, you give them a task, something you want them to do straight away. So as soon as they come on station, they're being utilised in the first 2 minutes. So you can pretty much create a JTAR, get it sent off, and that will be in the pilot's cockpit with the pilot that's going to fly that mission. And he'll have it with him. So he knows exactly where all the friendlies are going to be at the start point. He knows where they're going. He knows what the mission is. He knows what his mission is in support of mine. And that's a very, very useful way of utilising the air. And if you do it successfully, you can get 6 or 7 different sorties a day just for you and your company or your platoon, if it's done right. And I was doing that on my second tour. So there's two different ways.
If you want to move on, if you want to move on to the second tour.
Yeah, we can move. So my next tour was Herrick 18, and I was with the Armoured Battle Group for the Mercians. I think it was 3 Mercian I was with at the time. Again, we were in Lashkargah, but we'd moved out slightly off the green zone, and we moved onto a route called Route 501, and it was a main logistical route through Helmand province. So the Taliban used to IED it quite frequently. So our task was to protect a certain section of Route 501 and all the buildings and FOBs within the local area. So that was pretty much our mission. So I was the JTAC for that tour. Before the tour, it had taken me 18 months in total from starting the JTAC course to then being able to go on tour and do it as a job and be responsible.
Yeah. I should ask more about that. In my day, it was like an RAF job.
It was,
if I remember right.
It was the RAF.
It was the RAF that did it.
Yeah.
So did you do the training with the RAF and other arms?
Yeah, so basically the way it worked was they didn't have enough JTACs to handle the Afghanistan situation. So they needed a massive uplift, and they thought, who better to use than artillery observers? Because they understand airspace, they understand what's going through the sky, and we understand what's happening on the ground. Yeah, so...
And armoured recce guys as well, as I found out.
Yeah, they do, yeah. Yeah, so I volunteered to try it. I had to go and do an aptitude test for it, which I did. And then I ended up going to, where is it now? RAF base up just south of Catterick.
Leaming?
Yes, RAF Leaming, that's the one. Yeah, so I went to RAF Leaming, and it was a 12-week intense course. That was probably the hardest mentally of courses I've ever done in my career. It was tough, mentally tough. So that was 12 weeks, and then what happens is you finish the course, but then you have to do 6 months continuation training with your JTAC instructor within your regiment. So every regiment at this point had a JTAC instructor. So we then went to various exercises in America, Europe, UK, continually gaining controls. And that was done under the supervision by our JTAC instructor. He always had to be with us when we did it, because we were qualified, but we weren't qualified and certified. So after that 6-month period, for mine, I had to go to the States. I think it was North Carolina I went to. And I was in a 3-hour practical test with live aircraft. It wasn't live ammunition for that particular range, but it was live aircraft for 3 hours. And I was put into a mixture of scenarios. I was put inside a vehicle, moved around, jumped outside the vehicle. There was a scenario like where we'd hit an IED. There was multiple casualties. So then I've got to think about calling in a MERT helicopter, because the JTAC also deals with that, because he's calling in an aircraft into the airspace. And so that was 3 hours. And after I passed that, then I became qualified and certified. So that meant on exercises, I could conduct live training with aircraft on my own, unsupervised. At that stage, then when I got into theatre in Afghanistan, I then had to do a further test for the Americans, and it was a sit-down theory test in Afghanistan. And it was to give them the warm, fuzzy feeling that I knew what I was doing to use their platform. Even though I'd controlled multiple US platforms on exercises throughout that 12-month period. they still wanted the warm fuzzy that I knew what I was talking about. So even right to deployment, when I was actually in Afghanistan, I'm still being tested before they'll let me loose and do it for real.
I can understand. I can understand that because I mean, like we said earlier about the responsibility of it. I mean,
Yeah.
the responsibility it's just fucking 100 times, more.
Oh yeah.
Really. I mean, you make one fucking wrong mistake, you get. And I'm not talking about like a drop shot or a fucking swinger.
Yeah.
It's far worse than that.
Yeah.
You get the odd £1,000 dropped in the wrong place and you're screwed, or you don't inform that jet that there's another one coming that way.
Well, that's it. That's it. You're now in charge of the safety of the aircraft as well as the safety of your guys you're with. Yeah. But it was, that final test, the pressure, honestly, the pressure I felt going into that test was ridiculous because I'm actually deployed now with a company and I'm their JTAC. So they're relying on me to pass that test or they're not got a JTAC. So the pressure on me at the time to pass that test was pretty immense. And I know JTACs that didn't pass that test. And I had to go back the next day and resit it.
That's crazy. I mean, that's going to affect your morale as well. Or
Yeah. Well, that'll be
your confidence even.
Exactly. It's a confidence knocker. But fortunately, all went well. I passed the test fine, and then I was on the ground, and I was conducting all sorts of different types of missions as a JTAC. I was conducting non-traditional ISR. And for those that are not quite sure what that is, it's basically utilising an attack aircraft, so something like an Apache helicopter. It's just designed for attack, but utilising its capabilities, its camera capabilities, etc., to do non-traditional intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance from an aerial point. So I was utilising all assets I could to try and maximise as much eyes on the ground around our fixed location, our forward operations base, and two, any elements of the armoured company that were moving out and about. So I always got them coverage every time. I was a ninja with the JTARs, absolute ninja. So I would do JTARs 3 days out, 3 or 4 days out prior to a patrol. I would always get mine in so that I knew I always had air coverage for any patrol that was going to be going out, or I'd maximise my chances. You're never guaranteed, but I always 90% had coverage of some description.
I mean, how often is it that a call for air or a call for fire, if you want to say it that way, was denied just through not the lack of resources or even political?
To be honest, everything I asked for, I got. I don't know. I can't speak about anyone else from other areas or other locations, but I think that had a lot to do with my requests being submitted on time in a lot of detail and pretty professionally done. So I never had an issue getting assets, to be honest. If I felt I could get more assets, I'd find ways of getting them. There was a few times where I'd spoken to a couple of American pilots who I were controlling during the daytime, and they would say that they're not getting enough air hours because there's not enough happening around Afghanistan. So I reached out to their aircraft carrier direct to their commander of their fleet and said, I'm willing to give your guys airtime if you're willing to come out and give me some air. So I ended up with 2 months of solid F-16 and F-18. Oh, solid.
It kind of beggars belief to hear that the pilots weren't enough time, enough air hours. You're like, what?
Yeah. Because if you think about it, it was Herrick 18, so it was towards the back end. So a lot of the areas the Americans were in, there wasn't much happening. But still, in Helmand province, there was quite a lot still going on. I mean, my tour, that last tour was for, we lost quite a few people on that last tour, and that was supposed to, and all that stuff was supposed to be finishing. The conflict's dying off and all that. At that tour, it didn't. Unfortunately, W02 Fisher from the Mercians, he lost his life through a suicide bomber. A week prior to that, we had 2 Americans get killed at our front gate, another suicide bomber. But the suicide bomb threat was massive on that tour. It was really prevalent on that tour. And that was really difficult to try and identify, even from a JTAC perspective, because all I'm looking at, all the aircraft looking at is a car. It's really difficult to try and find these guys.
So is there any standout, let's say, missions that you brought in that you can talk about?
I wouldn't say there was any.
That you remember fondly?
I wouldn't say there was any standout ones because there were so many of them. I think one I thought was pretty cool. I managed to get a massive Illume mission. Doesn't sound very sexy, but I got a massive Illume set, and it was I can't remember the aircraft now, but it was one of these massive, wasn't Spectre gunship, but it was one, I think it was one size down from that. And the SF use it, and they use the Illume off it, because they're basically massive barrels that they push out the back of this aircraft, and it illuminates pretty much a grid square. I'm not kidding. This thing is, the Illume is unbelievable on this thing when it drops the Illume canister out. It's massive, a massive barrel. You imagine a barrel and it's just getting rolled out the tailgate of a massive prop airplane. And basically,
that's fucking mental.
Yeah, basically, I was on duty one night and I was controlling a B-1B at the time, just doing some find and fit. It was about midnight or 1 a.m. And I got a phone call from Bastion saying, "Oh, we've got this aircraft coming over your airspace. It's got some Illume still on board that it didn't get used for some Delta Force mission that the Americans were on further in the north." And said, "Could you utilise it? Because it doesn't want to go back with it." I said, "Yeah, 100%." But I'd never used this stuff before. I'd never even trained on using this stuff. So the pilot checked in with me anyway, and I'd got on the radio with him, and I had a conversation with him. He's the weapons expert, the pilot of these aircraft, or his crew is. So I said to him, "What's the best way to use this Illume you've got? I've never used it." I said, "I understand Illume and how it works because I've done 155 Illume, etc., etc." I said, "But I've never used yours." And he basically talked me through what it can do, where best to put his aircraft in order to deploy it where I was telling him I wanted it. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you where that is, for obvious reasons. But yeah, this thing came out the back and illuminated, and it literally illuminated the town that we were in. It was unbelievable, to the point where the company commander, he'd only just gone to bed, actually came out of his tent, came to the op room and went, "What the bloody hell's that?" And I said, "It's the Illume mission I just put out." And he was like, "See if you can get some more tomorrow." Because we were still getting quite a lot of IDF on that location, especially at night time. So that's what I was trying to utilise that Illume for. But unfortunately, I never got a chance to use it again. Yeah, doesn't maybe not one of the sexier missions, but I just thought it was really cool. There was the Delta Force use that stuff, and I managed to grab some of it.
I mean, to be honest, I'd love to see that. I mean, I remember seeing Illume missions, and even a 155 Illume lights up a good area. And it's, if people have never seen Illume used like that before, I mean, I wouldn't say it's daylight, but it's fucking not far off.
Yeah.
Especially in the right area, if you use it in the right positions and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right.
It's quite, they used it in Iraq to disrupt people in Basra, didn't they, basically?
Yeah, that's correct.
Keep people awake.
Yeah.
Psychological warfare with the Illume shells.
And I think probably another key event from a sort of JTAC operational days, we were actually, it was the back end of the tour, and we were collapsing a lot of the forward patrol bases, forward operating bases, ours included. So we were into the last, I think that tour was a 9-month tour. I think we were into week 8.5, and the engineers were told, right, our fob's next, so we're going to do the collapse. So anyway, we're doing the collapse down, and I think it was a day before we would. So at this point now, the Hasco Bastion walls protecting the outside of the patrol base were now gone. They were completely gone, taken down.
Okay, hell.
Yeah. So we were now Ring of Steel. Back to Tell It One days, right? Cool. Ring of Steel, totally get it. And we're doing that. So we're back to that kind of armoured fighting again. And then we had a 72-hour withdrawal plan back to Camp Bastion, stopping off at various places for sleepages and a few missions along the route. And because that was our time done, that was the FOB completely collapsing, never to exist again, and there won't be any Brits in that area anymore. So I remember 24 hours before we started, all my JTARs had already been submitted, and I must have submitted 40 of these things to last me that whole period. Anyway, it was just as we were about to collapse, one of the sentry points of our armoured formation started getting hit by sniper and PKM. So obviously the Taliban knew what was going on. They knew we were closing down. They wanted one last pop at us. And it was effective sniper on the guy in the turret. He got injured, and then they moved the vehicle to try and get out of the way of them sniper, hit an IED. So obviously vehicle goes up, more casualties. So then they're like, okay, so at that point now, I'm requesting troops in contact. So I've got air assets coming in. I've requested for a Chinook helicopter Mert that's coming in at the same time. And they're always escorted by 2 Apache. So I knew that they were coming online so I could utilize them as well. Before I knew it, I had 7 different platforms stacked in my airspace like that, like a layer. Boom, boom, boom. From a UAS, I think I had 2 different US fighter jets, but they always come in pairs. So I had a UAS, I had a pair of F-16s, pair of F-18s. Then I had Apaches, 2 of British ones, and then below that I had two Cobra gunship. So I had a stack like this, and you could look into the sky and literally see the stack, like, because you have to leave a gap of altitude between 2 different pairs of aircraft so that they're not going to crash into each other, right? So like that. And you could visually see that stack. So what I was doing was I was getting one aircraft to come out of the stack, or one pair, do some business, and then go back into the stack underneath. So I was kind of rotating them like this conveyor belt, like that. And that was wicked. That was awesome. Purely and simply because you could visually see it. And that soon dealt with any Taliban problem. They weren't happy with that. I dealt with it. For me, I thought I personally thought it was overkill for the situation that we were in. But all the assets turned up. They all wanted a piece because things were slowing down. People weren't using the assets as much. There was a lot of courageous restraint. You've probably heard that term being used from some people.
Yeah.
It was very much forced into a courageous restraint, leave it to the Afghans. So people weren't utilising the asset. I ended up with a shed load of them all in one go. And needless to say, I didn't sleep then for 72 hours straight. I controlled aircraft straight 72 hours until we got back into Cap Bastion.
Collapsing the FOBs like that, how did that make you feel? I mean, obviously there's going to be relief that you're not in the area and you're going to be safer and stuff like that. But I remember speaking to a guy quite a while back about, and I know it's not really a comparison, but you'll probably understand what I mean.
I'm just going to move my camera because it's getting dark.
When Singapore closed, it was like the fall of the empire type of thing.
That's right.
Watching the FOBs collapse almost was like, what a fucking waste.
Yeah,
we've been out there doing this. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, it was a difficult one. I think at the time I was just glad because I knew I wasn't going back. In hindsight, when I look back on it now, after seeing what happened, with the Americans when they pulled out of the big air station, now I can say, oh God, I don't know what a waste. And you can't. There's no other way of explaining it. What else can you say? And again, it goes back to that. You can't tie yourself in knots over the politics of why we were there or why we weren't there. And you focus on. I had a job to do. I did it to the best of my ability. And that's all you can sort of do.
I've listened to not conflicting but different views on Afghanistan. I think we were right to be there because we were there to stop the fucking baddies, and we did stop the baddies.
Yeah.
We got to such a good point in Afghanistan that we could have still been there now, and it would be a very, very different place. The European Union could have took it over.
Yeah.
All right, the Yanks just pulled out and ran away during the night, let's say, because they fucking did.
Yeah, yeah.
In reality. But I've spoken to guys, a lot higher pay grade than me, who understood the bigger picture, and have basically said, we could have stayed there.
Yeah, I think the thing with
everything was calming down, and it was getting, we could have created a level of normalcy.
Yeah.
That and it could have been done, but we just fucking give up.
Yeah.
And that's a bad way of saying that we give up. That it's pulled out. If your big brother's run away with your football, you've got to go with him.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is more or less what happened.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so that pretty much sort of ended sort of my tour kind of years, if you will. But, I still had quite an interesting career to go post those sort of tour years. I kind of finished up in the end at NATO Headquarters in Italy for the last 2.5 years of my career.
I know when you told us, I finished in Italy, I was like, fucking what?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was,
jamming? You know
yeah,
what I mean? Is that a jammy job?
I think
Is
it
it a
was,
jammy posting?
it's trade specific.
Yeah.
Being a JTAC helped because it was a targeting role. It was an operational targeting role. And I think being a JTAC, so having the air understanding and being a forward observer and having the experience on multiple tours definitely helped to get me that job. So it was kind of an accumulation of my entire career. So that was the 22-year point was when I started my 2 years in Italy. I actually did a 2-year extension in order to go out there. But, what a fantastic opportunity that was. I was in Naples, southern Italy, right by the beach. You had a massive married quarter. The camp was, I think, 7 years old. It was modern. All the buildings were really good. There was so much money there. But the job was really interesting. So now we're talking now currently.
I mean, just to interrupt you a minute there, I can imagine you've got the job and you've gone home and you speak to your missus. We're getting posted. Oh, where now? Italy, Naples.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. No, we'd sort of sat down and discussed it because I was actually going to leave on my 22-year point, and I saw this job come up, and I thought I'm going to apply for it. So I spoke to the wife, and she said, "Yeah, but if we get it, that'll be great. Last 2 years in the sun, so perfect." And it really was enjoyable. It really was. The job was busy. It was busier than I was expecting it to be. Obviously, because Ukraine and Russia. So that was the kind of stuff that I was involved in and working on. I can't talk about any of it, if I'm honest.
No,
Why?
I can imagine, yeah.
I was working underground in the top secret zone, but it was very interesting. And I was actually working for Major General Meade. So it was great. Yeah, it was great to be working for him again. Obviously, known him when he was BC and then CO and everything else in between that and seeing him in Italy. So that was good to see him again, work under him again, yeah. So he was like the head of the British there.
Yeah.
In Naples. Yeah, but that was pretty much an accumulation of my entire career put into a very high profile position. I was on a lot of occasions I was briefing 3 and 4 stars quite regularly. But that's what 3 RHA did. It gave you confidence. That regiment gave you confidence to be able to go and do that sort of thing. And I swear it does. I know a lot of other regiments and a lot of they're good, great soldiers, but they can be quite timid or unsure of themselves sometimes. So I think 3RHA always made, I don't know, for me, it always bred confidence in people, I found.
I would say the tradition of excellence.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I don't know whether it was that or whether it was just how our seniors built us up to be and how we built our juniors up to be. I'm not sure, but definitely an air of confidence definitely comes from 3RHA soldiers for sure.
I mean, one thing I'd like to touch on before we end this one is, a lot of people who listen to this are of my age and a bit older.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting on a bit. Actually, I'm getting on about. I'm 56. Although on Saturday, some lass told me I look 45.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was drunk.
You definitely look younger than 50 odd. I'll give you that.
Thank you very much. It's the camera. It's the lighting. How the army's changed recently. Us old and bolder, it was harder in our day and stuff like that. And I don't think I've spoken to some guys who joined in the 60s, and I said to them, oh, yeah, must have, harder in your day because it was harder in my day than people who were joining now. And they went, well, no, not really. It was just different.
Yeah.
Society was different then as well.
Yeah.
But they spoke about some of the stuff they got up to. And I'm thinking, okay, that's just what we did.
Yeah.
Just a more modern version of it. And it wasn't. It was just the same shit that we used to get into, we used to get into.
Yeah.
And then I bumped into, a couple of years ago, we went over to a veterans night over in Prudhoe. One of the lasses who used to work on camp came down and was talking to her. And I always called Albemarle Albatross. I mean, I spent 6 years there with 3-9.
Yeah.
And I started noticing a difference, even in my last 6 years. I got out in 2012. I started noticing a difference in not the recruits that were coming through, but just the way the army was, and I don't want to say becoming more woke,
because it kind of has to. You know, the people who are joining the army now are different to when I joined. You know, we're not recruiting from. I don't think we're recruiting from the right areas anymore. We're not recruiting the scallies.
Yeah.
Or we're not actively going out looking for them type of thing. I'm not saying we're going to press gang everyone.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah. And I think the reason for that, and I don't think it's because we're not wanting those people. It was the closure of the local recruitment centres. I think that's what's done it. You know, you have your online system now, which everyone goes to online. But, you know, there's a lot of people from those deprived areas that don't have access to a computer. So how are they going to get online to go join the army? You know what? They used to do it by walking.
Massive sorry to interrupt there. I've had arguments with people on social media. I interviewed ex-RAF fighter pilot instructor. One of the things he said was exactly that.
Yeah.
He literally said exactly that. Yeah. Some people don't have access. You know, there's a level of, as he put it from memory, there's a level of poverty in this country that we are not akin to, that we don't understand.
That's correct.
Because we don't experience it. And there is. You know, there's poor, there's been on the door, and then there's fucking rock bottom.
That's right, yeah.
You know, and they don't have mobile phones. The parents don't have mobile phones. They can't afford it. They can't afford to eat half the time. But they don't have access to this digital media. They don't have access to that. And because everyone thinks that, well, everyone's got a mobile phone. They haven't. You know, not everyone's got a computer. Yeah. You know, the way he said it was, and I loved it. And this is, when I put this clip on TikTok, it went fucking viral on there. And he said, you know, people can't even get the local libraries to use the computers there because fucking local libraries are closed.
That's right.
You know, there's so many barriers to joining the military at the moment that I think they should get rid of the way they do it now and go back to how we used to do it.
Yeah, I think they should.
Even if you put it down, like, I mean, years ago, a long time ago, it was the regiments who recruited.
That's correct.
So they would send people out, you know, almost pressing in, you know, type of thing. But I think they need to do that again, you know, and you'll get I wouldn't say the more robust individuals coming in, but
the scallywags.
You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, the
rogues. Yeah. But it's, you know, I think.
Go on, sorry.
I think also another demographic that's changed is technology. You know, there's that much technology now being used, even by your basic infanteer. You know, you need to have a certain level of understanding of sort of technologies and computer equipment nowadays. So the type of people that are coming in are going to be slightly different because they're attracted by the new technology. You know, your UAS pilots and stuff like that. You know, all your small stuff as well. There's so much small technology coming in that your average squaddy uses now. You know, that you need a slightly different type of individual to be able to operate that stuff. But we definitely still need, you know, you sort of your rough dudes of of your estate.
Yeah.
You know, to put that bayonet in someone if needed. You know, so I do think they really should open up the local career centres. You know, that's a must for me. Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to someone the other day, and we got onto the subject, you know, of like the military and stuff like that, as I always do.
Yeah.
Kind of swing it round the conversation. I do a podcast, you know. And I said, well, you've got to think the military's job is to find, fix, and destroy. You know, our job is not to fucking be nice to people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's to go and kill them.
Yeah, you're there to destroy
them. Find them and fucking kill the enemy. Yeah. Find, fix, and destroy. It's our job.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. Yeah. We do it in very different ways, and we do lots of other things. I say a week. I've been out a long time, but you know, the peacekeeping, all the other aspects of everything we do. But we are there to defend the realm, defend the country, whether it be on home soil or somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, whether we agree with that or not, it's got nothing to do with mine. Our job in the end is to destroy the enemy and win a war. You know, and it's as simple as that, really. I mean, you've just transitioned out of the military now into civilian straight. How have you found that?
I didn't find it too bad. And I think purely and simply because of the last role that I had in Italy. With it being a sort of operational level headquarters, it was a very adult environment. It was almost like a civilian organisation in uniform. That's probably the only way I can put it. You know, it was all very much first name terms with colonels, even with the generals outside of work. So yeah, and it kind of had to be like that because it was very multinational. You know, I was only one of one British out of 16 in my section, in the targeting section. So you kind of had to be on a first name basis to make things work. But I found that it kind of adjusted me for civilian world, from not being completely regimental minded. You know, the way in the regiment it can be 100 mile an hour. You know, you are regimented in that certain way of thinking. And I think that last role of mine helped me just to sort of wind down from that. You know, the sun and the beach kind of helped with that. But, you know, yeah, and that sort of adult environment, I think, just helped me to sort of wind down, unwind from the 100 mile an hour of regimental duty, and sort of prepare myself for the next chapter, really. In terms of sort of resettlement, I thought the package was pretty good. There was plenty of access to all various courses, you know, for all different things. So if you wanted to fully retire and never work again, there's a separate package for that, where they teach you about how to get among social things, how to do hobbies, how to keep yourself busy, you know, all sorts of kind of ventures that you can do, just to keep yourself ticking over mentally more than anything. There was also one, if you want to work on your own or open your own business, there's a separate course for that. How to do your own business, you know, and it teaches you all about sort of tax return, you know, the company's house, all these sort of things that you wouldn't know as a military person. What else was there? There was also ones on, you know, like 1 day course, you know, how to improve your communication skills. So it's all about verbal communication. How do you present? How do you do presentations? You know, because not everyone's confident at doing that sort of thing. You know, and then when it comes to interviews, especially, you know, there's courses you can do on that, interview techniques. You know, I found it really, really useful. I didn't utilize the employment fair. Main reason was because there's none in my county, so I'd be going to another county. You know, to me, I didn't see that was viable when I could shop around for jobs and work in my specific area while I was here in my county. So I didn't utilize that, but there were plenty of them. I probably had access to 7 different employment fairs if I wanted to go on one.
I mean, I think the resettlement experience is different for every individual.
I think so. I think it's how much you buy into it.
Or to put it another way, how much your regiment lets you buy into it and doesn't want, you know.
Yeah.
I've seen too many people.
Yeah, that's true.
Need that time off and they can't get it.
Yeah. Well, I was in a very lucky situation. So when I returned from Italy, I was into my final 6 months, and the regiment put me into a last 6-month PID, which basically meant I was double pitted with somebody. Therefore, I wasn't required to do anything because there was no job for me. So they were happy for me to be able to have that time to do courses, because while I was in Italy, I was unable to do resettlement because there was a policy I couldn't do any longer than 2 weeks for national business or British business while I was in NATO. So I've had to use all my resettlement in the final 6 months. So the regiment sort of understood that and gave me the time. Right, you haven't done any resettlement. We're giving you that 6 months. Go and do what you've got to do. Get on your courses. Go and, you know, job hunt. Get on interviews. And it really, really, really helped me. And I was very fortunate and lucky that the regiment were able to do that for me.
I mean, it sounds as if the army's moved on a bit with resettlement. You know, I've heard many, many horror stories. I didn't really have a good one myself, but I was fortunate enough, like you, that I didn't have a job for me anymore, and I was basically sent home. But I lived on Albatross. There's not much going on there. You know what I mean? So it was kind of a bit of shit for me. But I was lucky. I walked straight into a job. But I've heard of lots and lots of guys who have not. You know, and they've suffered quite badly for it and never got what they wanted to do. I mean, what's your plans for the future? Yeah, bit of a glitch there.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay. Do you want to turn the phone again? It's not flipping. It's all right. Just turn it up. We'll deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah, there was if anyone's got to this far in the podcast, we've just had a bit of a technical issue there. We're back on it now. I was saying there, I don't know how much of that you heard, that, you know, I've listened to many guys who've had, I wouldn't say horror story. Well, fucking hell, some of them were horror stories.
Yeah.
Of when they've left the military, that they didn't get time to do resettlements. They didn't understand what was going on. And again, you know, I've seen it actually happen to people when I was serving. You know, some guys were getting out and you were like, well, why are you getting out? You know, they were getting out for the wrong reasons and stuff like this. And some of them later on rejoined and, you know, wherever. And some, you know, a lot of guys have fucking prospered.
Yeah.
After the military, and some haven't. But I mean, that's the same as, I suppose, leaving any job.
Yeah, of course.
but it does sound as though, especially the way you put it in your experience, it has worked. I mean, what is your plans for the future?
So I actually went for a job interview a month ago at my local prison to do operational support. So not prison officer, but pretty much the general security of the prison. And I passed the interview. I think there was 22 applicants. Yes, passed the interview, and I'm just going through the pre-employment checks now. I've been given a job offer. I'm just waiting on the pre-employment checks to be completed, and then I'll sort of start at the prison service.
That's good. I know one of the lads who does it in a prison down south, and he absolutely loves it.
Yeah. I've got a friend.
Absolutely loves it.
I've got an ex-serviceman friend that does it, and he says
Yeah.
it's great. He said it's great. And he said he hasn't looked back.
I mean, not for me, I must admit.
Yeah.
Not for me. I don't think I've got the right temperament.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a really lucky situation because I'm actually mortgage free. So me and my wife went mortgage free last year. So we're now living in that house. So that kind of takes up a big burden of the finances away. And with the military pension, we're in sort of good position where I can do a job that, doesn't have to pay great money. Just got to tick us over really and keep me sane.
Yeah,
It's the main thing. Yeah,
you never know what the future brings. You mean, and doing something completely different.
that's right. Yeah.
Right, well, we've come up to an hour and 40 minutes there. Like I said to everyone, thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Just a pity we had that little bit of a glitch a couple of minutes ago, or that would have been a clean slate, which was a lot better than when we tried it the first time.
That's right. Yeah.
That was a bad one. I think you're just jinxed. No,
If there's
thanks for coming on.
And if there's any of lads, that I've served with or, sort of the past 15 years, 20 years that wants to jump on, get yourselves on. Yeah. Give the podcast a go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always
Get your
after
stories.
guests, always after everyone, and everyone's welcome.
That's right.
We're just here to share your stories, for people to listen to them. And one of the things that gets me is when people have been in a while, and they reminisce about what they've done. But one of the really interesting aspects of it for me is what people have done since.
Yeah.
That's
and right.
It's such a varied, wide gambit of life that I've had truck drivers, prison officers, financial people, and guys who've run diving schools.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. You're just like, and a fair few guys have been involved in the veterans charities in one way or another, or even creating their own.
Yeah.
These things are there. And I mean, you've been through the mill with your career. Everything sounds cool, but always remember if there's anything that crops up, there's support out there.
Yeah.
And it's not, some people say it's hard to find. I think with the stuff like Op Courage and everything now, it's a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
For me, I thought it was fucking bulletproof. I hadn't nothing. I've not seen fucking any. But it's not about trauma. It could be just a build up over years and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It does affect people. Not everyone.
Yeah.
But there is help out there for people. But it's just getting to it. And asking the right people.
Basically, don't be afraid to go and get help if you need it, and talk about it. I find talking about it helps me.
That's why I do this.
Yeah.
I was still surprised after, Christ, how long I've been doing it now? 17, 18 months doing this, and I'm still surprised that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I was the last person. You remember me from third all them years ago.
Yeah.
I probably wasn't the most approachable person in the world. Yeah. Or the sanest.
Yeah.
Or the most sober.
Yeah. Just one parting thing I have got. I am currently writing a book.
Right.
And it will be getting published this year.
Right. I'll look forward to that. And when it does, let me know.
Yeah. It's going to be called Fire for Effect, Forward Observer Memoirs.
Right. I will look forward to that. And then when it comes out, we'll get you back on and we'll talk about the book. All
right. Great. Sounds good.
Right. Well, do me a favour. Do it in audiobook as well, because I'm fucking shit at reading.
Yeah, no, that is the plan.
Right. Okay then, mate. I'll stop the recording now. Honestly, again, thanks for coming on.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Take it easy. Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that would be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully it'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.